As Israel observes the high holy days, security forces are ramping up protection. Police in Jerusalem are standing guard at every synagogue in the city.
This year, terrorists have escalated their attacks against Israeli citizens, especially in the territory known as the West Bank. CBN's Julie Stahl reports from Jerusalem on the rising tension.
This year, terrorists have already murdered more than 30 Israelis. Most of the attacks have taken place in the West Bank, which is biblical Judea and Samaria.
We are facing something like around 200 alerts every day for terrorism, the intelligence radar, and of course the rate of fatalities is the highest in the last few years.
Reserve Major General Israel Ziv says those carrying out these attacks are mainly young people in their 20s. He adds, while they may not be part of organized terror groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad, those groups are smuggling weapons, ammunition, and money into Palestinian areas.
This equipment finds itself to the hands of those youngsters, and by the internet they find all the instructions how to carry terror attack on vehicles or on the settlements or all kinds of options that they have. And it's up to their decision, to take the act.
Ziv says this often makes it harder for Israel to track planned attacks. Adding to this chaos is the growing weakness of the governing Palestinian Authority.
We see that they are more busy within themselves. Most of them are corrupted. They are dealing with personal businesses and personal issues, and they are not running cities and the situation in the streets.
While Israel mounted a major military offensive in July, Jewish community leaders in Judea and Samaria are calling on their government to take tougher action.
There's a relationship here as if each terror attack is a one-time event. They're relating to terror like there's an attack and then another attack and then another. It's simply not right. We have a full war here. What we have is a real threat. And we came here to say to our government that we demand to go to war. We want to win this war.
We demand that the government of Israel takes action against these terrorists, like the U.S. and Britain would take action against terrorists that are firing rockets and shooting at women and children that travel on the roads.
Many attacks are happening along Route 60, known as the Way of the Biblical Patriarchs, traveled by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Many of the Jewish settlements, which much of the world considers illegal, are established there today.
We're building on the land that's ours. We aren't confiscating land. We're building in places that we bought or that belong to the country. We're doing it according to the law.
Council leader Shlomo Ne'eman questions how foreign governments can try to stop Jews from building houses in biblical Judea.
This thing is also given a tailwind to terror, and it backs up the Palestinian Authority.
Council leader Israel Gantz calls on the international community to shift its focus to helping fight the terrorism.
We must fight with the terror, and we want to thank for our friends, for the world, that support the fighting in the terror, because we all know the terror can start here and grow for all over the world.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, tell us about the security measures that are being taken right now in Israel.
Well, Gordon, statistically, the holidays are a time of increased both heightened alert and attacks. Remember, this is the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, so Israel's aware that these high holy days can be a time when its enemies attacks. So right now, there's an increase in police preparation, increased patrols, the amount of police on duty. As you mentioned, there's also armed guards at the synagogues and religious gatherings over Rosh Hashanah. They've called up a large number of police, canine units, bomb squads, and so they can be available in the field. Also, elite undercover units in densely populated areas, sort of like Mahane Yehuda, which is a large open-air market here in Jerusalem. All this is designed to make sure that Israelis and tourists are protected and they feel more secure. And as you say, we're in the 10 days of awe right now, Gordon, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Jews reflect on their lives. They make amends. They ask forgiveness of each other. And they feel that they're in the valley of decision. They want to be right before God and man. And the expression you hear here in Israel during this time is, Gemar Haitima Tova, may you have a good inscription in the book of life.
Well, these security provisions are also happening here in the United States. Right here in Virginia, I saw armed guards in front of a synagogue. They were checking IDs. They were making sure everything was safe for the people inside. Is this a global phenomenon now?
Definitely, Gordon. I would say that anti-Semitism has risen around the world, and very likely, these attacks are possible. That's why you see guards here, as well as the United States and other places around the world. Certainly in Europe, where anti-Semitism is really spiked in places like France and some of the Western European countries. So certainly a global phenomena of these anti-Semitic attacks during these high holy days.
Well, let's talk geopolitics. The Biden administration has agreed to transfer $6 billion in oil revenue. They were trying to facilitate a prisoner exchange, and that could actually come off today. So what's the feeling in Israel about this deal?
They're not very happy about it, Gordon. I would say that it's very, very likely that this $6 billion is going to be used by Iran for what it does really well is the leading state sponsor of terror in the world. We're talking about a regime that has a history of violating its agreements. So the sense here is that this money is fungible. It can be taken from one account to given to another. They say, and supposedly this was going to be used for humanitarian purposes, but you could free up money by funding the other terror groups in the region, and unless you consider support for Hezbollah humanitarian. And they could also use it to suppress the Iranian people, who there's been a one-year anniversary of these rise in protests against the regime. They can use it to suppress that. So many critics are saying here in Israel and other places that these funds will fund these nefarious work Iran is doing within its borders and around the region.
Well, I just shake my head over it, because what Iran is doing to its own civilian population is absolutely horrific. They're using facial recognition software to specifically target leaders of the protests, and then they're putting them on trial, and then they're executing them. It just underscores for me the danger we all face if the authoritarian regime gets in place. There's plenty of technology now to make sure that you can never protest something that the government is doing. I'm kind of at a loss as to why the world community would ever let this happen, and why there's any support for this kind of deal. But anyway, we'll turn to another topic. Netanyahu is going to be meeting with President Joe Biden at the UN this week. What do you think they're going to talk about?
Well, first of all, Gordon, a lot of people here in Israel and the government see the venue, the UN, as opposed to the White House, as sort of undermining the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, and considered by some a major snub to Netanyahu himself. But what they'll talk about, certainly they're going to talk about Iran, whether or not the U.S. and Israel can support each other, help each other in a possible military strike. Likely another topic would be judicial reform. The Biden administration has come out strongly against judicial reform here in the country. And certainly for Netanyahu, he's going to be advocating for that strong measure and stronger measures against Iran. The rhetoric after the meeting will likely, both countries are saying our relationship is stronger than ever, but there is obvious differences on a number of issues, from Iran, the Palestinian issue, and but also, Gordon, one other scheduled meeting Netanyahu on his schedule that's getting a lot of attention is his meeting with Elon Musk. A lot of people will be wondering what they're going to be talking about as well.
That will be an interesting meeting. I guess last question, I've got to talk about the domestic politics. You talked about judicial reform. The divisions in Israel seem to be almost equal to the division, if not greater, than the division here in the United States politically, with the country evenly divided. What do you think is going to happen politically? These protests seem to be ongoing. And regardless of how the Supreme Court rules, what do you think will be the outcome?
Well, the protests they've continued here in Israel, but they've also gone to the United States, and they're going to be protests against Netanyahu and his government, not only when he goes to the UN, but there's other venues that they're doing to protest. It remains to be seen what will the Supreme Court will do. They had hearings this past Tuesday. It's yet to be seen what they're going to decide, but I think those protests are going to continue, Gordon. It's really an issue that is really dividing Israelis on so many levels, and as we had talked before, a very important time to be praying for one 133, verse 1, that those good and pleasant when brethren dwell together in unity, certainly at this time of the high holy days.
All right, Chris, thanks for joining us, and thanks for the insight. And let me just underline, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Look at the political situation in the United States today, where the rhetoric is beyond anything I have ever seen in my lifetime, where literally you can't sit down and talk with the other side. You view them as some kind of enemy that is destroying democracy or destroying the country. And then in Israel, it's the same thing. They're looking at each other as enemies. And in that, a divided house just gives opportunity for our enemies to take the advantage. I think Russia's waiting for our 2024 election, and then they're going to escalate this war in Ukraine. I think the terrorists are actually rejoicing over what is currently happening in Israel and hoping for a downfall, not based on any of their acts, but by what they are doing to themselves. So let's pray, as Chris told us in Psalm 133. Oh, how good and pleasant it is. Could we have something pleasant happen in both countries and happen soon?